50, 50, 50, 50, fall half of every dollar made by the WNBA. The Players Association entered the negotiations with that demand, and they used the worst nuclear threat in professional sports to support it. If they don't acquire it, blow up the entire 2026 season. It seems like a strong play on paper. Music a unified front. Athletes in a league that has underpaid them for decades are defending themselves against rich owners. The kind of narrative that creates a cultural moment on its own. The kind of narrative that inspires opinion pieces, celebrity endorsements, Twitter music threads, and all the other tools of contemporary public compassion. This is what the headlines failed to tell you, though. However, that entire plan began 50-50 to fall and not apart as soon as Caitlin Clark put on her sneakers and entered the Team USA practice area. Not because of anything she said, not because of any public criticism of the union or its leadership, not because of any inter 50, fallen not 50 et. Tweet.befallen not crafted at tweet.tweet.tweet.abweedat. She was merely a basketball player. By doing this, she music subtly destroyed what the veterans believed to be their most valuable negotiation tool. Utilize leverage. Leverage that is actual, quantifiable, and tested by the market music. The kind that doesn't originate from crafted theated statements to favorable journalists or press releases. The kind that results from sponsor contracts, ratings paperwork, and the cold, heartless math of who stays at home and who shows up to watch. The version of this tale that ESPN is airing is not what we are going to get into. They keep glossing over this aspect. The portion of labor dispute coverage that is hidden under the Surfact tweet, crafted and note, Thethagos.goes.10. But section that truly explains what's happening to this league at its core and why the 2026 season might be decided by everything that has already transpired on that Team USA practice court and in those unparalleled arena seats that never quite filled up as the organizers had promised. This is a tale of leverage. Regarding what it truly means to have it, what it means to lose it, and what occurs when a sports league realizes in real time that the difference between its estimated value and the market value is more than anyone was prepared to acknowledge. Fasten your seatbelts, music Vika crafted the tweet. The goes.goes.goes.10, but craft Teddy's one from a place of deep. You have to go back to see thegos.goes. How we got here 10, but but hold thee, not 10, knee back hold from a place awfully 30 years. The WNBA operated for more than 30 years in the manner that many things do when someone else is paying the expenses. It made it through. Music it continued, but it never really flourished on its own in the manner that a financially independent sports business must flourish to have genuine bargaining power at a collective bargaining table. Music by providing financial support to teams who were losing money at a rate that would have bankrupted any independent company functioning in the actual market, the NBA was effectively running a financial life support operation. Furthermore, by subsidizing, we do not imply a 10, button, butac back hold back hold 'em a place off goes. Y bridge loan or a little backs halt until the league stabilizes. Music we refer to the systemic, persistent, year-to-year financial dependence that influence every facet of the WNBA's operations over decades. Music NBA teams provided the arenas. The infrastructure for administration was borrowed. Instead of the WNBA's own independently developed brand equity, the NBA's reputation and contacts provided the operational legitimacy that kept sponsors at the table. Consider the implications for a league's identity and negotiation stance. Music you are not operating when you are financially reliant on another organization, when your survival depends on the goodwill and ongoing investment of a parent organization that didn't create you primarily for profit, but rather for a combination of marketing, optics, and a sincere interest in expanding women's sports. From power. Gratitude is a bad basis for a collective bargaining approach based on aggressive baton, but cold revenue demands, and you are up from a place operating from a place of fossy, gratitude. Genuinely excellent basketball, real athletes, real talent, and real moments of brilliance that merited bigger crowds than they got were the products on the court throughout those years. Generational athletes like Sue Bird, Diana Torton, but from a place of Fosse, P. Taurasi, Lace of Taurasi, D. Taurasi, and Tamika Catchings developed careers in a league that was unable to adequately compensate them. Spent their off-seasons performing abroad in Russia and Turkey music in order to make ends meet, and carried the burden of a sport that the larger American sports market had subtly determined wasn't worth their continued attention. For what they created during years when it was very difficult to develop, those guys deserve a great deal of appreciation. However, those years also produced something hazardous within the league's culture. A common conviction that the accomplishment was simply surviving. It was evidence of the value that the battle itself represented a form of equality to simply exist and keep putting a product on the floor every season despite the financial difficulties, the small audiences, and the borrowed infrastructure. Given the situation, that idea made sense, but it was about to be put to the test by market forces that don't grade on a curve and don't give credit for work, history, or how challenging the path was to get here. A draft pick served as the test, and the WNBA would never look the same. No sports economist with a spreadsheet of women's basketball forecasts, network executive, or WNBA front office had a model that could have predicted Caitlin and Clark's transition from college basketball to the professional sport. It was clear how much she had accomplished at Iowa. The attendance records, the social media engagement figures that caused marketing executives to reconsider, and the television ratings that regularly rivaled and occasionally surpassed men's NCAA basketball. That was all true and documented. However, it was widely believed in the sports industry that college athletes don't usually transcend their fan base to the professional ranks. It's possible that the casual fans who attended the college version of a story won't follow it into the WNBA. Music, the circumstances were different. The stakes seemed different. The infrastructure for marketing was different. There were legitimate grounds for caution regarding assuming that Clark's influence from college would just transfer to Indiana Fever box office receipts and national TV ratings. Within weeks following her professional debut, those motivations vanished. Not only did the crowd follow Clark to the WNBA, it came in large quantity, music, from a place of Caitlin, music, SI, and wit, and with a level of intensity the league had never seen before. In the markets where she was performing, television ratings did not slightly increase. They blew up. Networks that had previously viewed WNBA broadcast rights as a budget line item, useful mainly to fill programming hours during a slow sports calendar period, found themselves in a completely different discussion about the value of those rights and the audiences they could consistently bring in. Sponsors with return to the table with real money and real multi-year commitments, not with exploratory interest or pilot projects to test the waters. After years of passing on women's basketball, music, Enumber Media, the casual sports fan, the group that had mostly disregarded the WNBA for 30 years. The person who watches March Madness and the Super Bowl and may even follow their local NFL team, but had never had a cause to interact with women's professional basketball before. That fan appeared. The Indiana Fever's ticket infrastructure was overloaded by T-Music, He's number, music, here amount league has of tickets they purchased. They watched games in locations where Clark wasn't even participating because the larger story she was creating was captivating enough to garner national interest. They adhered to plots. They debated each other. They engaged in the kind of spontaneous, natural cultural dialogue that is impossible to create with a sports marketing budget. Clark's inaugural season's viewership figures were more than just records. They belonged to a completely distinct type of record. Team records, league records, records for women's professional sports in general, and occasionally records that were in direct competition with viewership benchmarks for men's professional sports leagues with decades of established audience ties. For years, conservative revenue estimates were revised. One player on one team's roster changed the WNBA's negotiating numbers. Number stance W Media its broadcast music partners. Since its establishment, the League Media League H, League has Media UE has experienced its first League has Media Number League Heju Music prolonged mainstream cultural moment. And after witnessing all of this, the veterans came to a decision that, while it made perfect sense to them, turned out to be one of the most costly strategic errors in the annals of professional sports labor disputes. They told themselves that everything that Clark had produced, fans, ratings, sponsor interest, and cultural attention, belonged to the group. That the audience had come for women's basketball and would continue to do so regardless of the presence or absence of specific players, that the tide had risen, and that rising tides lift all boats. There was only one plausible test for that assumption, and before they built their entire CBA strategy on top of it, no one at the union table seemed particularly interested in running it. When media layers of players' association entered the collective bargaining battle, they had developed a plan that appeared strong on paper and felt strong in gatherings of like-minded individuals. Basic presumptions regarding the true location of their sports worth. The league was making more money than before. There had never been a greater cultural awareness of the commodity. Music, after decades of waiting, the moment seemed to have finally arrived, and the demands fully mirrored that belief. 50 of league earnings. Maximum contracts with figures that were unimaginable 5 years ago were guaranteed. Housing provisions that are guaranteed. Travel conditions were significantly improved, addressing the long-standing and justifiable complaints of athletes who had played in conditions that no other major professional sports league would have accepted during their careers. Commercial travel is replaced by charter flights. Actual financial stability for athletes who had previously lived their entire careers in danger of financial ruin due to injuries. A story with real emotional and historical weight served as the foundation for the framing of these demands. For decades, players had been taken advantage of in a league that lasted mainly because they played at a high level and showed up for pay that had little to do with the value they were adding to the business. The recent increase in sales was evidence that the product, music, had always been valued and had just never been fairly compensated, not that it had suddenly gained value. At last, the billionaire owners were being asked to fairly share in the wealth that the players had created. It's a strong case. It produces the kind of public empathy that produces effective union messaging and opinion pieces. It has the kind of cultural momentum that a labor movement needs to endure a protracted negotiation, as well as political resonance and media traction. And it was based on the fundamental premise that no one in the union's strategic inner circle seemed to have conducted a thorough stress test prior to making a commitment. It is assumed that the sport, not the celebrity, is what this audience is here for. Everything else makes sense if that premise is true. Because the product has independent worth and the fans will be there when the season resumes after a labor stoppage music, you can make harsh demands because the owners will suffer actual financial penalties from losing games and momentum. The leverage is real. Because players see players because off music because off players music seem. Die-cuts the players must be on the floor in order for the league to run and have an interested audience, which is what the owners need. However, everything flips if that assumption is incorrect. The leverage calculation is entirely different if the audience is there particularly and nearly exclusively for one player. Threatening to take away something that the opposing side knows it can live without is not credible. Additionally, the other party is examining the same rating materials that you are. They are fully aware of how the statistics because of music, seem, players dedicates both with and without Clark on the ground. Seem, music, because OR. They would determine whether the union's fundamental premise was true. Before the CBA fight had even begun, no one had predicted that the veterans would conduct the experiment themselves in public on national television. Achieved the most important musical stage. Unrivaled's concept was simple and, from the union's point of view, tactically elegant. Music create a high-end 3-on-3 off-season league with the biggest season players in the WNBA. Put it on national television with genuine network support and production values. Promote it vigorously. Give it time to develop an audience and breathe. And in doing so, show every sponsor, broadcast partner, ownership group, and casual sports fan watching the WNBA labor dispute that this group of seasoned players could produce viewership and cultural significance without Caitlin Clark's involvement. Unrivaled had a sophisticated infrastructure. Dedicat Music seem dedicates airtime and broadcast resources. The marketing expenditure was substantial. Players who had spent years establishing themselves as the faces of women's basketball were listed on rosters. Aaliyah Boston, Breanna Stewart, and other seasoned players with respectable credentials and real star power in women's basketball circles. Music, there were professional production values. Everyone in the sports industry who was paying attention knew the music and the clear goal behind it. Instead of using press releases and negotiating position papers, this was a proof of concept, a live demonstration, and an argument based on ratings, viewership, and sponsor engagement. The veterans were designed to demonstrate to the market that Clark wasn't the main character. Women's basketball was the narrative, and they were basketball for ladies. Music before anyone at the union table had a chance to spin it, contextualize it, or attribute it to outside forces. The market delivered a verdict in a matter of days that was so quick and comprehensive that it fundamentally reshaped the entire negotiation landscape. Music viewership's viewerships.ropped, but not in the slow, unclear manner that allows a failing product to change, reposition, and find its audience. Swiftly and decisively. Within the first week of games, Nielsen data revealed the decisions made by fans who had spent the previous WNBA season interacting with women's basketball in ways they had never done before. In comparison to moderate expectations, the ratings were not dismal. They were a decision. The kind of figures that make their way from measurement reports to the desks of sponsor reps and broadcast executives, creating a picture that everyone can see but no one in the room wants to discuss aloud. There was star power throughout the show. It was of high production quality. It was supported by the network. Music, the marketing was strong. It possessed everything that is generally believed to be necessary for a new sports property to attract viewers. Music, Caitlin Clark was absent. It turned out that the audience had taken note. They had seen in the most straightforward, quantifiable, and commercially relevant manner imaginable. They were watching something else. Then music caused the harm. Boston, Aaliyah during what were meant to be low-stakes exhibition games. One of the pillars of what Unrivaled was intended to symbolize, and one of the players who had done everything right in terms of developing her profile and her game in the WNBA system, sustained a serious injury. Commercial disaster is loaded with physical viewership dedicated.liabilities.s.abilities. Show then an off-season endeavor that had just shown it couldn't provide the audience it promised. Players who needed to be fit for the WNBA season were suffering injuries. At the same time, the losses were mounting in several ways. The veterans had put together their strongest case, professionally packaged it, shown it on national television, observed the market's reaction, and returned it with a response that could not be concealed by any amount of clever reframing. When requesting half of a league's income, you must be able to molly abilities. Viewership ne wisho thaith. Show the music that you make that money with. Liabilities. Show the money with. Unrai money with. Veiled was designed with that demonstration in mind. Instead, it produced a separate one. Additionally, the identical ratings materials were available to all parties at the collective bargaining table, regardless of their position. This is the aspect of Caitlin Clark's reaction to all of this that sets her apart from almost every other athlete who has ever been in the middle of a labor dispute that they did not initiate, did not request to be involved in, and had compleximony with. Money with. Incentives regarding how to handle publicly. Nothing was spoken in response. Quiet. Total, calculated, strategically damaging quiet. Not a well-crafted statement that softly distanced herself from the tactics while addressing the union's concerns. Not a leak to an amiable reporter who could be relied upon to present the situation in a positive light. Not a subtweet that, depending on the reader's preferences, might be screenshotted and shared as proof of either betrayal or unity. Music, there was not a single public phrase that could be cut, altered, replayed, and or subtweeted utilized to bolster or contradict whatever narrative that the negotiators were attempting to create. She participated in a basketball game at the Team USA camp. That decision sent more information than any news conference could have, and it was unquestionably made by someone with advisors, agents, and a thorough awareness of the media landscape she was working in. When compared to the current upheaval of the WNBA labor dispute, the optics of her appearance on the Team USA floor created a contrast that no PR firm could have created, and no crisis. The communication plan might have been nullified. Think about what was going on at the same time. Vice presidents of the union were giving ESPN access to internal correspondence. The content of those letters showed that members were pleading for fundamental clarity regarding the status of the negotiation and the actual strategy, even inside the union's own leadership structure. Public indications indicated that the United Front was neither as cohesive nor as tactically coherent as the initial posturing had suggested, and the communication machinery surrounding the strike threat was unraveling at several points. Music in the most public setting conceivable, the narrative of group strength was created, display created, showing obvious fissures. Music on the Team USA practice court, Clark and Breanna Stewart were conducting drills. Clearly competitive, they both exuded excitement in the video, which went viral without any kind of promotion since it didn't require one. The happiness was genuine. The chemistry was genuine. The level of competition was genuine. The demand for real athlete content is huge and instantaneous, so you can't produce that type of footage in a controlled media environment showing environment, and you can't stop it once it starts. The most honest broadcast was the psychological difference between the two environments, the accountable, purposeful, and obviously happy Team USA training environment, setting versus environment versus 0.0. The shattered, leaky, internally divided WNBA union communication structure. During that time, the WNBA might have broadcast music not because it was designed that way, but rather because of the difference between THVBS.SVS. When both were occurring at the same time and producing footage that circulated throughout the same sports media ecosystem, facts were just too vast to conceal. For the union strike narrative to be sustained, it needed a particular image. The players had to resemble the characters in the story. Underappreciated, underpaid, and crushed by a system that put the riches of wealthy owners ahead of the athletes who truly made the product work. That is a valid argument with solid historical support, but it necessitates that the actors project a particular sort of struggle, a particular kind of weight, and a particular kind of apparent grievance. Additionally, Clark was actively working too, music, sick, against that need in every second of the Team USA video, which showed him competing with true joy and uncontrollable passion. Sponsors did not perceive a league in peril when they watched that Team USA video. They, weary witnessing a single investment that was secure, high quality, scalable worldwide, and able to provide the kind of genuine athletic content that consumers interact with on all platforms and in all markets. The ledger in their minds was calculating the return on that particular investment in real time while they watched Clark. There was no way for the union story to stop that computation. It was being run by the market with or without consent from anyone. The moment that served as a punctuation mark on all that had been developing then arrived. Not a manufactured punctuation mark, not a meticulously planned media event intended to provide maximum impact at greatest weary to the great strategic timing. A true basketball moment, the kind that the game has always been able to create without a labor dispute or CBA, no collective bargaining technique or negotiation, can be suppress the greatest when it arises naturally. Late in a competitive Team USA camp session, teammates are watching with the kind of focus that only occurs when players are active, suppressed competing rather than going through promotional motions, and the stakes are high. Clark scored the game-winning goal. Not a layup in a garbage time scenario that the marketing staff could use as a highlight, but a music pressure-tested, disputed, competitive shot in a setting that was asking real athletic questions, music, and getting real athletic answers. Music, a real game-winning shot under real pressure. The teammates' response was spontaneous and instantaneous. The kind of response you only receive when something genuine has just occurred in front of people who have spent their careers fighting at the highest levels and are aware of how uncommon real music is, are able to quickly and effectively gauge the caliber of what they have just seen. That genuine, impromptu response was caught by cameras that just so happened to be there, not because anyone had planned for this particular moment, but because cameras are usually present in Team USA environments, and music was what made the video go viral. It moved without the support of any infrastructure for promotion. Lack of a coordinated release plan. There is no timing estimate intended to optimize platform reach. No social media team is using algorithmic timing and optimized captions to promote it across accounts. It simply traveled. The way things move in today's media landscape when they record something that seems indisputable, identifiable as real. After years of ingesting content ranging from the really captivating to the plainly fake, sports fans have acquired incredibly well-calibrated authenticity detectors. They instantly recognized the difference, and they reacted to that clip with the intensity and fervor that only genuine athletic moments. No revenue prediction document could have conveyed information about their investment estimate as effectively as any sponsor who watched that video. No union demands or ownership counteroffers had been able to make sense of it, but every television executive who saw it understood something about future rights talks. Even if they might not have been able to explain it well, any casual fan who saw it on their feed recognized that what they were watching was the reason people watch sports in the first place. The moment, the shot, the response, and the unique energy that permeates a group of top athletes after an incredible event. Music. There was a face in the clip. The moment had an architect, and by the time it had reached every major sports platform, the negotiation table had changed in ways that no later news release or piece of music, no matter how well crafted, could undo. In the language that it speaks the best, the market has publicly and plainly expressed its opinions through music. Genuine sporting events that naturally interest viewers without needing to be reminded to care. As we approach what is truly the most significant off-season ASIN season in the WNBA's history, let's be clear about what all of this means for the CBA battle. Here, accuracy is crucial since the surface-level story, union demands, ownership opposition, and potential work stoppage mask the real power dynamics that will dictate how and on whose terms this is addressed. A work stoppage may still be threatened by the union. Neither legally nor practically has that option been eliminated from consideration. There are systems in place. The rhetoric is ready. Audiences who are concerned about labor issues in general find great resonance in the public framing of player rights and fair compensation. Additionally, there is a sincere desire in the media for a story that pits athletes against owners in the struggle for financial justice. That infrastructure has not vanished. However, the threat's leverage, the real two successive data pieces that came to light before most crucial phase of negotiations have undermined the market power that lends a strike threat credibility with those seated on the other side of the table. Music hollowed out is not a rhetorical device. It's a precise, quantifiable explanation of what transpired when the market assessed the union's main demand and produced an outcome that went against it. The 50 revenue demand was undermined by Unrivaled's ratings drop. Music. If you want to claim half of the league's earnings, you must be able to prove that you make money without the presence of any specific players. For that purpose, the unparalleled 3-on-3 league was created. The contrary conclusion was supported by the evidence it produced. The seasoned talent pool was expertly put together, vigorously advertised, and shown on a reputable national network, resulting in audience figures that validated what ownership groups had secretly suspected, but were unable to substantiate until we provided them with the evidence. The reservoir of talent is not the sports business engine. One particular player is involved. The second pillar was eliminated by Clark's Team USA performance. If the first pillar was that we make the money, the second would be that we are the only location where it can be made. The commercial value vanishes without the WNBA, which serves as the platform. The commercial value travels with the player, not the platform, as shown by the Team USA film, especially the game-winning clip and the larger story of Clark competing passionately and spectacularly on a global scale. The anywhere it functions, the engine may create an audience. The WNBA is not particularly necessary. The WNBA requires it. When negotiating a collective bargaining agreement, billionaire owners are not sentimental players. They are financial actors reacting to data and incentives. They now have very particular information about the strike threat they face because of the data points they have. They suffer from a work slowdown, but senior players suffer even more. Furthermore, it does not harm the one party whose commercial worth forms the basis of the entire agreement. The degree to which ownership must take the possibility of a 2026 season disappearing seriously is significantly altered by this asymmetry. The engine is necessary for the passengers. The engine has shown that it doesn't require the passengers, or at the very least, doesn't require this particular vehicle to go there. For anyone who has dedicated their career to the WNBA system and truly deserves greater compensation than they have typically received, that is an uncomfortable perspective. However, the market does not prioritize comfort. The market is utilizing its available data, and the information it contains was produced by decisions taken by the union leadership and seasoned players. This is the question at the heart of everything right now. Is music both uncomfortable and inevitable? Does the leadership of the union have the ability to reevaluate what transpired based on the version of events that the market actually created music, rather than the version they would desire to be true? It's a big request. Adjustment implies admitting that the 50 requirement was predicated on an assumption that failed to withstand touch with reality. It entails returning to the table with figures that accurately depict market dynamics as opposed to optimistic estimates of collective leverage that have now been disproven by the data. It entails negotiating an agreement that enhances player conditions. Better travel, better minimums, true financial security, and real improvements in quality of life that address the legitimate complaints that have existed in this league for decades without tying those improvements to a revenue percentage that the market has just shown isn't supported by the collective's independent commercial value. In a union organization, that is a politically challenging task. Members who supported strong demands because they thought their combined influence when a leadership team returns from the table with a significantly reduced deal, we won't cheer. External observers frequently underestimate the complexity of the internal politics of union discussions. Regardless of whether the market reality ever supported their expectations, leaders who publicly pledge to fulfill certain requests face serious repercussions when such music demands don't come to pass. However, the other option is worse. Proceeding with a strike threat that ownership now recognizes is structurally flawed entails running the possibility of a work stoppage that causes the greatest suffering to those who have the least financial support. Music WNBA veterans are not operating from positions of personal financial security music that allow them to absorb an extended period without a league, even though they have made greater use of their summer choices than their predecessors. Earnings. The owners, who are billionaires, can wait. Most of the players are unable to. Additionally, the one player whose commercial presence makes the entire discussion pertinent has already shown that she has career alternatives that are entirely outside of the WNBA-CBA structure. Here is a deal that significantly improves the situation without forcing anyone to misinterpret the leverage map. Considerably better housing assistance, actual minimum wage raises, enhanced travel circumstances, and health and wellness programs that take into account the physical strain the sport has on players' bodies. A revenue-sharing arrangement based on real, proven market growth as opposed to a predetermined amount based on non-existent leverage. A structure that honors the development that Clark's presence is fostering without assuming that the group as a whole produced it equally separately. That agreement is feasible. The 2026 season is waiting to see if those in the room can bridge the gap between what they desired and what the market claims is accessible. Take a step back from the specifics of the CBA. Because there is more going on in this WNBA labor dispute than just one collective bargaining agreement. Every piece of Team USA film, every statistic point, and every unparalleled ratings record is a live representation of the tension that women's sports have been silently and uneasily managing for years. The real moral and strategic significance of solidarity as an organizing concept and the cold market truth that commercial growth in professional sports is rarely driven by collective progress are at odds. Talent. It is fueled by individual celebrities who produce the kind of cultural energy that transforms uninterested onlookers into ardent admirers. All of the world's major sports leagues are aware of this conflict. Music LeBron James and the other players in the NBA are at odds. The NFL's elite quarterbacks and the nondescript offensive linemen who play in front of them are at odds. The WNBA situation differs in that the concentration is more intense, the timeline is more condensed, and the negotiation is taking place during a time when the difference between the market value of the stars and the collective has been publicly measured in real time using data that are accessible to all. Solidarity is the foundation of the conventional union argument. Music, everyone gets up. Collectively, everyone who contributes to the product owns it, and each contributor shares fairly in the product's commercial worth. For decades, the argument has propelled significant advancements in professional sports labor relations music, and as a principle, it is sound, supporting players at genuine value to a product that would suffer in their absence. The case for collective remuneration is valid, but it encounters a particular structural issue when a product's economic worth is so concentrated in one person that the presence or absence of that person affects the market's quantifiable results. At that moment, the market facts and the solidarity argument are at odds, and the negotiation table turns into a mess, where one side is reading Nielsen reports and coming to different conclusions while the other is making a principled argument. This issue wasn't caused by Clark. She didn't ask to be the only commercial engine in a sport that required one. The unparalleled failure, the Team USA moment, or the game-winning clip was not created by her. She was a basketball player. Music, the market reacted in a particular way to her basketball style. Additionally, the WNBA's labor negotiations are currently taking place in light of what the market's reaction has shown about the current location of the sport's true value. Music, the veterans who established careers during a more difficult period in this league are not the antagonists in this narrative. They played under extremely challenging circumstances and promoted enhancements that were justifiable and essential. Enhancing the lives of professional athletes who have previously received inadequate compensation is a legitimate and significant goal of the union. Music, however, advocacy based on a misinterpretation of the leverage map is not only ineffectual, but also detrimental to the real objective because it hardens positions, burns negotiating goodwill, and runs the risk of the kind of season-ending work stoppage that could undo years of hard-won growth that no one can afford to walk away from, not even the players, owners, fans, or sponsors. Someone is calculating the cost of misinterpreting this particular moment in this particular sport at this particular turning point in its history somewhere in a room full of attorneys, agents, union representatives, and ownership executives. The shot drops, the clip moves, and the ratings document is on the desk. The 2026 season is drawing near. The answer to the question of whether it truly occurs and if the league that has at last found its commercial footing will safeguard it or risk losing it will reveal a great deal about how well the people in charge of this sport comprehend the recent change. Because the script was already written by the market. Whether anyone at the table has read it is the sole unanswered question. This is where all of this leaves us, and it's important to be honest about how complicated that situation is. The WNBA is at a turning point that it might not return to for another generation. The league had a real, precious, and urgent window of opportunity to establish something long-lasting because of the commercial success that Clark's entrance brought about. Stronger sponsor partnerships, improved television deals, and a casual fan base that now finds women's basketball to be an engaging sport product and, under the correct circumstances, may be kept. That window music doesn't remain open forever. These kinds of windows close when the window's opening moment expires or when the actions made within cause the window to close too soon. The leadership of the union placed a wager. They wagered that the aggressive demands were the appropriate starting point for a negotiation with owners who had profited for decades from underpaying the workers who made their product work, that the leverage was real, and that the collective market value was real. Music, a portion of the wager was based on principle and history. A portion of it was based on an assumption regarding the cause of the recent commercial expansion, which the market has now assessed and determined to be inadequate. The proprietors calculated the opposite. They saw the numbers for unrivaled. They watched the footage of Team USA go viral. They evaluated the discrepancy between the union's leverage claim and the actual leverage and came to findings that will determine how seriously they handle the danger of a work stoppage in the coming months. All of this does not imply that the players should receive nothing. It indicates that they will receive something different than what they requested. Additionally, the data points that accrued between the initial demand and the bargaining deadline directly affect the gap between the ask and the outcome. Clark continues to play. Probably the most crucial sentence in the entire narrative is that one. Music, the player who has reset the commercial limits of this sport, continues to show this regardless of what transpires at the negotiating table and how the 2026 season turns out. Every public appearance explains why the reset occurred and what the market is currently paying for when it pays attention to women's basketball. She is not holding out for the labor dispute to end on its own. She is not making her business presence dependent on how a discussion turns out. She is not directly involved. The market is reacting to her basketball in the same manner as it has since she first set foot on an Indiana Heat court. She is playing at the best level she can find in the most prominent settings. The map of leverage has been created. The information is available to the public. Now, the question is whether the individuals in the room will negotiate using the current map or the one they wish had been created. That response is on the way. The deadline is the 2026 season. Furthermore, the ruling will reveal more about this league, its music culture, its leadership, and its real relationship with the market forces that shape its financial future than any press release or negotiation position paper could. The script was written by the market. We now wait to find out who has been reading.